A South Korean trade delegation is poised to depart for the U.S. this week for more technical talks on tariffs. Our foreign affairs correspondent Pei Eun-ji has the latest.
What should Canada do when its most important trading partner becomes unpredictable and dangerous for international relations? How can it find new ways to prosper in a world that is changing faster than ever? Today, we will talk about how Canada needs to rebuild its foreign policy and economy amid global instability. Unbelievable, but true. Over the past few years, Canada has faced challenges that seemed impossible.
Bessent also noted there are 18 important trading partners that the U.S. is most focused on solidifying deals with, while adding that there are a lot of smaller trading relationships. As the deadline looms, he said Washington may impose some tariffs by region rather than on individual countries.
A country long considered a reliable partner on the world stage has found itself at the center of a diplomatic storm. The American president started a trade war with Canada, and this conflict affected not only the economy, but also the very idea of free trade. How did Canada respond? Instead of depending on one partner, Canada had to look for new opportunities in regions where its influence had previously been limited. One such step was the Prime Minister's visit to Asia, which literally became an opportunity for the country to establish itself as a reliable partner for developing economies. But what exactly is Canada trying to offer when faced with countries such as China?
U.S. President Donald Trump on April 2nd announced a set of reciprocal tariffs on major trading partners, including South Korea, before putting a temporary pause to those levies for 90 days.
And India. Why is its new course in Asia crucial for the future of not only the country, but also the global economy? Until recently, Canada had to balance on the political knife edge between the U.S. and China, while having ambitions to strengthen its role in international affairs. But for several months now, relations with Washington have left much to be desired, and now Canada needs to look for alternatives more than ever. The question is how they can offer terms that are beneficial to both their new partners and Canadians themselves without losing their unique economic and political identity. But it's not just about politics. Canadian companies are ready to invest in new technology startups and innovative industries such as artificial intelligence and energy. They're already building their infrastructure to be competitive in the future. And despite the crisis, many new opportunities are opening up for Canada in the rapidly growing Asian market. But as we can see, it's not that simple.
And we have, at the same time, 150 countries that want to make a deal, but you're not able to see that many countries. So at a certain point over the next 2 to 3 weeks, I think Scott and Howard will be sending letters out essentially telling people, it would be very fair, but we'll be telling people what they'll be paying to do business in the United States.
China is a country that forces Canada to be cautious in its actions, not letting it forget past conflicts and threats to national security. India, with its long history and specific politics, cannot be ignored either. And here, a very important question comes to the fore. How can Canada build a strategy that takes into account the diversity of interests and complex political situations? Today, we will reveal how Canada is coping with new global challenges and what is really behind its efforts to regain its role as an important player on the world stage. How might this affect its future? And what steps could lead to new opportunities for business, investment, and the well-being of Canadians? In early 2025, Canada will undergo a significant geopolitical shift. The country's Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has traveled to Asia in search of new partners and strategic allies. This is his first visit to the continent as Prime Minister, and its significance cannot be overstated. It all started when relations between Canada and the U.S. began to deteriorate significantly. The trade war with Donald Trump, political disagreements, and a wave of protests that affected not only the Canadian market, but also the global economy, became a catalyst for the search for new directions in world politics and economics. Amid growing uncertainty on the international stage, Canada needed to find alternatives to its main trading partner. And so Carney began actively cooperating with leading Asian countries, viewing this strategy as vital to the country's future prosperity. His goal is to convince Asian leaders that Canada is ready to be an important and reliable partner in the new world order. It is noteworthy that Carney's trip to Asia coincided with a wave of anti-American sentiment in regions that traditionally supported the United States. A notable example was a recent forum held in Singapore, where many Southeast Asian countries began to rethink their relations with the U.S., especially in light of political decisions related to trade tariffs and sanctions.
Those trade deals with other countries also have limited or no relief from those sectoral tariffs in those strategic industries such as steel and autos. They include substantial commitments by the U.S. trade partners for investments in the United States and significant unilateral trade liberalization measures.
During his trip, Carney was expected not only to strengthen Canada's position as a stable partner, but also to enhance its influence in strategically important regions such as Malaysia, Vietnam, and India. The Canadian Prime Minister actively communicated with representatives of these countries, presenting Canada as a reliable ally that understands the importance of multilateral agreements and supports the free trade system. However, behind this seemingly successful visit lies a more complex task, not only to present Canada as a profitable partner, but also as a country that is ready to adapt and find ways for joint development in the face of global turmoil. Carney stated that the world is undergoing significant changes, and in these conditions, it is extremely important to have partners who can guarantee compliance with international obligations and work with other states in an atmosphere of mutual respect. It is noteworthy that in his speech at a meeting with representatives of Malaysian business circles, he emphasized that Canada is ready to become a strategic partner that always follows the rules and is ready for long-term cooperation, regardless of the external political situation. However, his words could be interpreted as implicit criticism of the U.S., given that the Trump administration has systematically questioned the advisability of international trade agreements in recent years and has sometimes deviated from previously signed commitments. No one could fail to notice that Carney also tried to bring elements of not only economic but also moral leadership to this visit. He raised issues of the importance of the rule of law and the predictability of international relations, which was not only an expression of political stability, but also a way to emphasize the instability of current relations with the U.S.
Those were quickly followed by reciprocal tariffs on every U.S. trade partner and very high sectoral tariffs applied globally on strategic industries, including steel, aluminum, autos, and copper.
Carney hinted that Canada needed to be prepared for global change, even if it meant abandoning its traditional dependence on its superpower neighbor. It was a diplomatic move aimed at demonstrating independence and foresight. For many Asian countries, especially those facing trade barriers from China and the U.S., this approach proved appealing. In his public statements, Carney reiterated that the future depends on those who are willing to respect existing international agreements and work together for the benefit of all parties. A key aspect of the trip was Canada's demonstration of its openness to cooperation with a number of Asian countries, many of which have in recent years begun to actively seek ways to minimize their exposure to economic conflicts between the U.S. and China. Asian leaders, also in search of new economic paths, have begun to lean more toward a model of cooperation with Canada, which has offered itself as a partner with a number of advantages. In particular, the country has emphasized its potential as a supplier of environmentally friendly technologies and a reliable supplier of natural resources. Carney's visit to China, despite previous tensions, was also an important step toward normalizing relations with one of the world's largest economies. China increasingly needs stable partners to implement its ambitious economic programs, and Canada, with its vast energy resources and strategic geography, could well become one of the key players in the Chinese market.
The United States has also imposed substantial trade actions on the Canadian lumber industry. Now, in recent weeks, the United States has agreed a series of trade deals with a variety of countries. And these deals have several aspects in common. First, baseline tariffs cover a broad range of goods and services that are substantially higher than those U.S. tariffs that existed before.
The complexity of relations with the U.S. in recent years has only reinforced the need to diversify foreign economic policy. Issues related to the Trump administration's behavior on the international stage, in particular the cancellation of trade agreements and the introduction of new tariffs, have further pushed Canada to seek alternative paths for development. This need became increasingly apparent as both domestic political processes in the U.S. and the country's foreign economic policy became less predictable with each passing year. Whereas economic cooperation with the U.S. had previously seemed self-evident, the picture has now changed. Trade wars with its continental neighbors, new sanctions, and the instability of Trump's policies posed a serious challenge to the Canadian government. Against this backdrop, Carney stated that Canada's future would largely be determined by its ability to find and strengthen relationships with other countries that are willing to work within global agreements. This was an attempt not only to seek new partners, but also to prove that Canada is ready to play an important role in the new global architecture. In his speech in Singapore, he emphasized that Canada needs to be flexible and adapt quickly to changing conditions without losing sight of its principles. This flexibility, in his opinion, will be a decisive factor for the further development and stability of the country's economy. Meanwhile, in Asia, where the economy continues to grow rapidly, countries are more interested than ever in finding stable and reliable partners. Canada must not only prove its commitment to a multipolar world, but also become an active participant in the changing global order. Understanding the importance of these changes in the economy and international politics was the basis for Carney's visit, which not only promoted Canada as an attractive partner, but also emphasized its unique ability to predict and adapt to new conditions, making it an important player on the world stage. The Canadian Prime Minister's visit to Asia was not just another step in the search for new economic partners. It was a strategic message to the global economy, presenting Canada as an important player amid growing uncertainty in international relations.
As in previous trade disputes, Canada has implemented a series of retaliatory tariffs. Their objectives have been to protect Canadian workers and businesses and to incentivize a negotiated settlement with the United States. Few other countries followed suit.
The most significant will be the economic sectors on which Carney will focus his efforts. Energy, future technologies such as artificial intelligence and quantum computing, and infrastructure, which is critical to Canada. These industries are not only promising, they are key to its long-term economic growth and security. The most obvious and perhaps the most important sector that Carney will focus on during his trip to Asia will be energy, given that Canada has the world's third largest oil reserves and is one of the world's largest natural gas exporters. The country is actively expanding its presence in Asian markets. Notably, during his visit, the Prime Minister signed several strategic agreements with a number of countries, including Malaysia and Vietnam, which include plans to expand Canadian natural gas supplies to Asia. This is a decisive step for Canada, which seeks not only to diversify its markets, but also to increase its role in ensuring the energy security of regions that are becoming increasingly dependent on energy resources every year. In this context, particular attention has been paid to expanding liquefied natural gas, LNG, supplies, including to China, where demand for energy continues to grow. The agreement signed with a Malaysian company on joint LNG development was not only an economic, but also a political step that strengthened Canada's position as a reliable partner in the energy sector. The fact that Carney is promoting Canada as a global leader in future technologies should not be underestimated.
In a positive and very important development earlier this month, just a few weeks ago, the United States reaffirmed a core commitment to our free trade agreement, CUSMA, by reinforcing that those Canadian exports to the United States that are compliant with that agreement, that are compliant with CUSMA, will not be subject to U.S. IEEPA tariffs.
He called for active cooperation with Asian countries in such innovative areas as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and cybersecurity. In meetings with representatives of the region's leading technology companies, Carney emphasized that Canada intends to become one of the world's centers for technological innovation, leveraging its strengths in research and development. Noteworthy was the agreement with Japan on the introduction of new methods of quantum computing, which, according to analysts, could significantly influence the development of the global economy in the coming decades. However, such ambitious projects require significant investment, and Carney emphasized the need to attract capital from Asia to finance these initiatives. An equally important aspect of Carney's visit was infrastructure issues, particularly ports and transport hubs through which major trade flows pass. Meetings with representatives of the port authorities of Singapore and other key countries in the region were part of a broader plan to modernize Canadian ports and improve transport infrastructure. In the context of globalization and the growth of international trade, infrastructure modernization is not only a matter of domestic development, but also a crucial element in expanding trade ties with Asia. It is noteworthy that as Prime Minister, Carney emphasized the need to modernize ports, particularly those in Vancouver and Halifax, which rank among the lowest in terms of efficiency among the world's largest ports. According to the Canadian government, the country loses billions of dollars annually due to the low efficiency of these facilities. This prompted the government to launch a large-scale infrastructure modernization program in partnership with Asian countries willing to invest in the development of Canadian ports. One of the most controversial issues during Carney's visit was the question of cooperation with China, which remains a key trading partner despite existing political differences. Tense relations with the U.S., including a trade war, and increased political pressure have forced Canada to rethink its strategic interests in Asia.
In fact, the average U.S. tariff rate on the world has jumped from just over 2% at the end of last year to almost 16%, 8 times higher, 16% currently.
Carney made no secret of the fact that Canada needs to find ways to balance its relations with the U.S. and China, especially in light of China's growing economic needs and its ambitious Belt and Road Initiative. However, despite its efforts, Canada faces challenges related to high levels of political sensitivity, including issues of national security and protection from foreign interference in elections. This approach, focused on strategic diversity, should help Canada reduce its dependence on a single partner and mitigate the risks associated with geopolitical instability, This was confirmed by the deal with India, in which Canada offered its solutions for India's industrialization and technological independence, which may become an important element of bilateral relations in the future. Discussions on joint projects in the field of energies and technology confirm that Canada will increasingly work with Asian countries, seeking not only to increase trade volumes, but also to create mutually beneficial long-term partnerships. However, not all regions of Asia view Canada as a completely safe partner. For example, relations with China in the field of technology remain tense, especially on issues of cybersecurity and data sharing. While Chinese companies continue to actively introduce their technologies into the global economy, Canada has to carefully balance openness with protecting its national security interests. Canada must find a way to work with China without risking becoming part of its technological dominance, which could threaten not only economic interests, but also national security. Thus, the most important goal of Carney's trip is not only to create new trade routes, but also to build a more independent and sustainable foreign policy for Canada. The country must not only strengthen its position in Asia, but also actively seek new opportunities for long-term development in the context of new economic and political realities.
In a positive and very important development earlier this month, just a few weeks ago, the United States reaffirmed a core commitment to our free trade agreement, CUSMA, by reinforcing that those Canadian exports to the United States that are compliant with that agreement, that are compliant with CUSMA, will not be subject to U.S. IEEPA tariffs.
During the Canadian Prime Minister's visit to Asia, the most important topic was how Canada should build relationships with global players, such as China and India, in the context of global change. While the country seeks to diversify its foreign economic ties, it must also decide what its position will be against the backdrop of global economic and political shifts, especially in the context of China, India, and other major countries in the region. Canada's relations with China have gone through significant difficulties in recent years. First, in 2018, relations between the two countries deteriorated following the arrest of a high-profile Chinese businessman at the request of the U.S. In response, China launched political and economic reprisals, including the arrest of Canadians and the imposition of sanctions.
I spoke to Governor Trudeau on numerous occasions, and we'll see what happens, but it just sets up so good for them. Look, the people would pay much less tax than they're paying right now. They'd have perfect military protection.
Throughout this period, Canada had to balance the need to protect its interests in relations with China with its obligation to follow U.S. foreign policy. However, despite the pressure, Carney sought to establish working relations with China during his visit, promoting Canada as an important partner in the fields of energy and technology. Canadian companies actively cooperate with Chinese companies in the extraction and processing of natural resources, as well as in high-tech areas such as artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. Canada, with its vast energy reserves, can offer China long-term cooperation in oil and gas supplies, making relations with this country economically important for both states. But the problem is that China has become increasingly dominant in technological fields, which is causing concern among Canadian authorities, especially in light of the growing threats of cyber espionage and interference in the private sphere. In meetings with Chinese officials, Carney emphasized that Canada is willing to cooperate, but only in areas where it is possible to maintain a balance between economic development and national security.
And to these ends, the United States has announced a series of trade actions. Those began near the start of this year with the so-called IEEPA tariffs against Canada and Mexico based on U.S. concerns about the border and fentanyl trafficking.
In this context, discussions with Chinese partners focused on the need to establish a clear and transparent framework for cooperation that could reduce risks to Canada's security and national interests. In addition, Carney addressed human rights issues, particularly in light of cases involving the Chinese regime. Issues concerning minority rights and pressure on activists became an important topic in meetings with Chinese representatives. However, Carney also promoted the idea that Canada should approach these issues pragmatically, as relations with such a major economic player as China require flexibility and mutual concessions. The Prime Minister emphasized the need to balance economic interests and moral principles, which became a cornerstone of Canadian diplomatic strategy. The situation with India was different, although it was also far from cloudless. Relations between Canada and India remained fairly stable, despite several major diplomatic incidents. However, against the backdrop of India's economic growth and its role in the Indo-Pacific region, Canada needed to rethink the strategic importance of this country. India, with its large population and developing technologies, is an important trading partner for Canada, especially in areas such as agriculture, technology, and energy resources.
Specifically, under the new U.S. approach, countries must now buy access to the world's largest economy through a combination of tariffs investments, unilateral trade liberalization, and policy changes in their home markets.
Canadian companies are actively working in India, and this market continues to be one of the most promising for the Canadian economy. However, the diplomatic crisis caused by accusations against the Indian government in the case of the political assassination of an activist on Canadian territory has jeopardized some aspects of bilateral relations. Recognizing the complexity of the situation, Carney sought to build a more constructive and pragmatic relationship with India based on respect for the national interests of both sides. To this end, Canada had to radically rethink its approach to issues such as interference in the affairs of other countries and transnational repression. At the same time, it was important for Canada to emphasize the need to comply with international human rights standards, which, despite the current difficulties, remained an important element of its diplomatic line. During his visit, Carney stated several times that strengthening the strategic partnership with India requires determination and tolerance, as well as a willingness to take steps to reduce tensions in relations and lay the foundation for long-term cooperation.